Hey guys, this is Mark Owings, and I'm your host for the Unbridled Life podcast, where we have real, raw, and unreligious conversation to encourage and challenge men and women in their daily lives.
Welcome to the Unbridled Life podcast. My name is Ellie Owings, and I am still taking over for Mark. We are back to continue our journey through these determined women of the Bible. You can read more about them on the YouVersion Devotional in the show notes or if you click the link below. Today I'm here with my mama.
Hi.
She is a determined woman in my life, and we have Miss Kimmy.
Oh. Hey, Kimmy.
We are so excited to have you back. And then we have our disco ball.
Bring the disco ball. You know, I have that hanging in my kitchen because it's my least favorite room in the whole house. But I'm glad to be here. I'm super excited to be with y'all. And it is going to be a party. We've already determined. It's going to be a party.
Yes. We are so excited. If you haven't gotten a chance to listen to the past two, we've done Deborah and Mary Magdalene. Definitely add those to your list. My dad's vision for this was that it would be written by a man, delivered by women. And here we are, getting to bring that to fruition. Deborah, just to recap, Deborah was a warrior and a prophet that mothered a nation and obeyed a word of the Lord to deliver Israel. Mary Magdalene was a friend of Jesus and the first one to get to run and share the good news of the resurrected King. What an honor that must have been for her. And I'm so excited about these next three. Today, we get to learn from Ruth. Ruth is most commonly known for her loyalty and her determination to stay, even when it made more sense to leave. She is friendship. She is obedience. She's unwavering and faithful. Someone who knew and faced grief in the face and still chose a better story. In a world of cancel culture where it's easier than ever to fall out of love or to run to the next easiest and most comfortable thing, Ruth teaches us to stay and to fight for love. And maybe you're out there listening to this and you have just tuned me out. Let me encourage you to keep listening, keep watching, because this is going to be really encouraging.
Yes.
And maybe you know someone that's walking through something that this could apply to them. And there would be nobody else better than my mama.
Aww.
Someone who is determined to stay, to fight for those that she loves. Mom, will you introduce us to Ruth?
Of course. So Ruth was one of the daughter-in-laws of Naomi. And if you didn't know, there is a book of Ruth in the Bible in the Old Testament. And Naomi and her family moved to Bethlehem to Moab during a famine. Her husband and her two sons die, leaving Naomi and her two Moabite daughters-in-law, Ruth and Orpah. So Naomi decides to return to Bethlehem, and she urges both daughter-in-laws to stay in Moab. Orpah stays, but Ruth famously declares her loyalty, saying, "Where you go, I go. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God." So Ruth and Naomi return to Bethlehem in poverty. Ruth gleans in the fields to gather leftover grain and ends up in the fields of Boaz, who treats her with great kindness. Can you just imagine her being in the field?
Boaz, like that one more time. Boaz, yes.
I can imagine her in the field and she looks up and sees this man and is like, whoa, there's Boaz. She doesn't say anything. She just goes back to working. And Naomi encourages Ruth to seek marriage with Boaz, who is a kinsman redeemer, someone who has the right to marry a widow in the family to preserve her husband's lineage. So Boaz agrees and marries Ruth, and they have a son, Obed, who becomes a grandfather of King David, placing Ruth, a foreigner, in the lineage of Jesus Christ.
So good.
Wow.
And one thing I loved that I read about was Boaz's role as a redeemer foreshadows Christ's redemption of humanity. That's just awesome to me that he was someone for us to glean from.
Yeah.
And then Ruth, a Moabite, becomes part of God's chosen lineage. So just thinking about where she came from and where she ended up, that the Lord.
Could we say she was kind of like from the other side of the tracks? Is that if we need to? But I mean, it was
No, seriously.
scandalous,
Yeah.
that she ended up. So sorry, not to.
No,
Yeah.
go for it.
Yeah, not to. But I mean, it gives us all hope, right? That no matter what you come from or where you come from, our Kinsman Redeemer has made a place for us. So
Definitely. Yes.
For sure. And if you don't know the story of the Moabites,
yeah, do tell.
So Abraham is this old man that the Lord promises to give him an entire nation. And through Abraham comes long after Jesus Christ. But out of Abraham, we get a man named Lot. And Lot is Abraham's nephew. And the Moabites are kind of facing this famine. And they're like, if we don't reproduce, our people are going to be nothing. And so Lot's daughters get him drunk and sleep
Talk
with
about
him.
Yes. Talk about scandal. I mean,
Crazy.
the Bible, it's like what Mark says. The Bible is X-rated. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So anyway, go
Yeah,
ahead.
they get him intoxicated and sleep in bed with him.
Yeah.
And Moab carries the Moabites through this famine and brings their people back to reproducing. But these people are looked at as the lowest. They're kind of like the scarlet letter.
Yeah.
Whenever they would have to come into the church, it would be like somebody standing outside the church doors, the welcomers, and be like, "Hi, welcome to church. Hi, welcome to church. We're so happy to see you. Are you a Moabite?
Yeah.
You can't come in.
Close the door.
Yeah.
Close the door.
Yeah. Like the lepers of.
Yeah.
You can't come in here."
Yeah.
And out of that lineage is where Jesus came. And he chose Ruth, this amazing woman, to deliver the king.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So good.
One thing that stood out to me from Ruth is that she chose poverty to go to poverty out of her loyalty to Naomi. And in a world where everything feels so disposable, it's easier to leave a marriage, a friendship, a job, or even our faith. Sometimes it's just like, oh, I'm just figuring it out and choosing our next adventure. Sometimes it does feel easier to leave. When in your life has it felt easier to leave? And what caused you to stay? Or not? Maybe you didn't stay.
Yeah. Really good questions. I'm going to let y'all think about that. But I have to, I love the story of Naomi and Ruth because it makes me think of my mother-in-law, Sugar. We call her Sugar. But I do remember as I was preparing for this, before Kyle and I got married, there was at one point in our dating relationship that Sugar and I had really become close. And I looked at Kyle and I was like, listen, we may break up, but I'm not breaking up with your mama. And Sugar for life. Yes, Sugar for life. I just think there's something so beautiful about that older, younger, especially for women. Men need it too, but that relationship, and it really took me back in a state of remembrance of how grateful I am for my mother-in-law and what all she imparted to me. And I feel like I know how Ruth felt, like, where you go, I'm going. I'm not leaving you, out of almost like desperation. But anyway, it made me think about that. And we talked about this a little bit in coming over here together. And obviously there's different seasons and there's different relationships. My brain went to marriage and basically your question was, it can always be easier to jump ship. Right.
Yeah.
And with marriage, I'll speak for my marriage. we just burned the boats. Like we were like, there is no plan B. Divorce is not on the table, but you do have to get a little bit radical with at least for marriage, I believe, because you can certainly find a reason to jump ship. So what about y'all? What do y'all think?
I actually have a crazy story. So I was just high as a kite after Mary. Like I love diving in and learning about Mary Magdalene. And so I was like, okay, next it's Ruth. And, we're going to go on this trail with these determined women. And I have been struggling with Ruth and just connecting with the story. Not even kidding. Yesterday morning, I was like, Lord, I'm really struggling. I'm going to need you to help me connect these dots to her. I feel like I'm reading about someone instead of connecting, So we're going, I'm taking Jason into his doctor's appointment. And so we're coming into Fort Worth and we hit this section of the road. To the right of the road, this has been said before on the podcast before, but my husband had some affairs in our marriage. To the right of the road is where he would meet one of the women.
Wow.
Not even kidding, the same exit. To the left of the road is where we went to counseling.
No way.
So we pull up to this yesterday, and I hear the Lord direct me to that question that says, when has it been, when was it hard?
Yes.
And I just like tears just started flooding my eyes that was so even, and I thought about this, like even pulling up to that stop. I can look
right or to the left.
I can look to the right and I can focus on the things that were horrible, that were so hard, that I so wanted to leave in those moments because it was so hard.
Yeah.
Or I can look to the left.
Wow.
Where counseling, and if you're out there and you have the opportunity to get counsel, I mean, counseling saved our marriage. We never even knew people who had done counseling before. It was one of those things like you don't talk about it. Nobody does it. So just even like I can just remember even being mad at Jason that we had to pay money for counseling, let alone go to it. Like we're the people that have to be counseled. Like what is that?
Yeah.
And now I think I'm so thankful for it. But those were really, really hard times and really hard days. But I stayed and
You've gone.
stayed.
It was worth it.
And it was so worth it. And the legacy, like when I think about the legacy of Ruth now, like the legacy of Jason and Kim Hoffman is so greatly impacted by saying yes. And I know that's not everyone's story. I know that. But for me and our house, it is our story and our yes to be determined to stay when it was so, so hard. So
that's really beautiful. I'm so proud that you were so vulnerable. And as you were saying that, I was like, what would you say to the spouse that they're in that situation or something very similar? What's one little nugget that you can say of just choose today?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Keep saying yes.
Yes. I think in those moments, I had to look to the hope of Jesus.
Yeah.
And not my husband, because we're going to disappoint each other. There's going to be moments where we're like, I'm packing it up. It's way easier to leave today than not. But I had to look to the hope of the Lord, that people were telling me about this hope, that people were encouraging me about this hope. And I was starting to learn and take it from here to here. And so I had to stop and take my eyes off of Jason and put my eyes on Jesus, because there's no other way. If I had looked to him, there's no other way I would have left.
That's so good.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And I think in the same way that y'all didn't know that your decision, the lasting impact that it would have, in the same way that Ruth didn't know her decision to stay with this one woman would impact all of history to bring us our King.
Wow.
No, we're sitting here talking about her today. It's pretty amazing. And I'll just touch on really quick, because what I thought about through this was actually my husband choosing to stay. I walked through years of a really tough health battle, and he could have left a million times, and all he ever did was continue to love me, continue to serve me. It makes me want to cry. Throw resources behind me. I'm sure it was like you with counseling, is like, we gotta pay for how much naturopath and supplements and this and that. But it was very humbling to be the one that someone chose to stay the long road. So I probably different circumstances, but I can't imagine the gratitude that Jason feels.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So
Well, and
That's
I think
beautiful.
about, Kyle was your tangible kinsman.
Yeah.
redeemer.
yes.
So
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Wow.
you get to live with somebody that you touch and feel and know that is there forever.
Yeah,
you know?
I say, babe, you've kept me alive. I'm your greatest ministry.
Oh.
Just keeping me.
Well, when I think about my biggest grief and the hardest thing, I think about just the miscarriages and how
Yeah.
I felt
Yeah.
so disappointed in the Lord. And so
That's good, Les.
that was really hard for me to trust him again because I felt like he failed me. And it took me time to heal through that and realize that God had a plan for me.
Yeah.
Yes. Good.
And if I would have known that the greatest gift would be coming later, that would have been a whole different thing. But, I am just super grateful that later, Jesus would show me that he had Ellie as a plan to be in our home.
But you stayed,
Yeah.
even when it felt really easy to leave.
Mm.
The Lord's faithfulness and the dreams that you had in your heart, you still were faithful, just like Ruth. And man, what we can learn from her.
Well, and I'm just proud. I'm really glad you brought that up because I think we don't often tell the truth that sometimes we're upset with the Lord.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Les, that's huge. Like that's part of your healing is he can take it,
Mhm.
and to come and say, I have this wound and I know you could do this,
Yeah.
So I'm really glad you shared that.
And I even remember it just came back to me the night before we got the news that Ellie was there, that we, were going to get to go get her. I stayed up that night. Mark was out of town and I was in the nursery and I was on my knees just yelling at God going, why would you not give me this promise? Because we waited 2 years to get the news
Wow.
that she was ready, that they had this sweet baby girl. And sure enough, the next morning I wake up and I get the call.
After you had those moments.
Yeah. So the timing was perfect. He knew I needed to yell it out.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then soon, 6 weeks later, we were on a plane
Oh my God.
heading to get her.
Wow. That is
Yes.
incredible.
Amazing.
It makes me think too, like you had to have some pretty remarkable people in your life. I mean, Jesus' word speaks to us, but in those moments, in your tears and in your sadness, like there had to be people that the Lord continued to put around you that dropped little seeds of encouragement and hope to keep you. And then your battle with the Lord, like all of those things add up. And I think about that with Ruth and Naomi, like it says that Naomi even changed her name. Like when they got back to her hometown of Bethlehem, interesting. I didn't catch that till you were reading that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Such a good nugget. But that Naomi was so bitter and sad. She'd lost her husband. She'd lost her son. She'd lost her other son. Like we cannot just skirt over the fact how heartbroken this woman was. Have you been heartbroken? Are you heartbroken? Gather people around you. If Ruth wants to come alongside you, let her, even if you have nothing to give your friend right now, who's your Ruth that wants to come alongside you, or your spouse. Thank you, Kyle, that you came alongside. You didn't have anything to give Kyle in those seasons. And he said, I don't care.
Yeah.
I'm here for you. Like Jesus with skin on, here for you. Yeah.
It's a really good
That's
point.
really
And,
good.
you know, we were talking about this in in kind of preparation of, I think there's always seasons and tensions of, you know, we're going to go through grief or bitterness. But I was thinking about when we are called to stay, you don't have to be superwoman.
Mm.
You know, I thought about Kyle he did a marathon, and along the way, because it can feel like a marathon, right? I mean, I'm sure that season felt like a
2
marathon.
years.
My health,
A long
and these
time.
seasons, these are a long time. And but when you do a marathon, not that I know personally.
Yeah.
Okay, I have to say this. We can cut this, but marathon, and I like got dressed up in like athletic garb
did.
and like bounced around thinking you would think I did the New York Marathon. But here is what I learned through his process was they have water stations. They have this gel or this goo the stations that they stop along the way or they grab along the way to stay hydrated and to stay fueled. And so, you know, I thought about you know, we use this example all the time, but on the airplane, if they say, if we have problems and the oxygen comes down, you have to put it on yourself first and then you can help. And so if you're in a tough season with someone, you need to take care of yourself. And you need to also, I thought about the posture of your heart. I think there's a line in becoming a caretaker because you now become, that becomes your identity. And we don't want to cross over where really that person, only the Lord is ultimately responsible. You know, it's interesting that Mark wasn't there for you that night.
That's true. Yeah.
You know, I mean, God needed you to square up with him.
Right.
There's probably a better way to say that. But
That's true.
I mean, sometimes we gotta go to the garden. We gotta go. I think about the night before Jesus went to the cross and Jesus had his 12. And then he actually even had a little more intimate circle of 3, but he had to go. They fell asleep on it.
Yeah.
He had to just go with the Father. So
That's
I'm so glad
I'm
you brought-
diverting just a little bit.
No,
but
I actually wanted to bring that up. Boundaries.
Yes.
And what that looks like. And maybe that's the counselor coming out in me. But I think it's really important to talk about.
Yeah.
Because Ruth didn't take responsibility for Naomi's bitterness and brokenness. She came alongside her.
Yeah.
Naomi was bitter and broken, but Ruth didn't try to fix her. She stayed and she loved and she served and she put up a healthy boundary with Naomi.
Before she had the book.
Yeah,
And so we have a lot of resources.
resources.
You know.
Before there was all these resources like podcasts,
Correct.
Dr. Henry Cloud.
Yeah.
She had the Holy Spirit with her.
Come on.
And
Girl, you better preach. I just got goosebumps.
that's the crazy thing about the story of Ruth is it was never she heard a word from the Lord.
yeah.
It was just inside of her. And it didn't have to be this smoke and clouds and spiritual. It could be just her relationship with the Lord led her into who she was. And I think maybe you're listening out there and maybe you're tired of staying. I can speak from somebody who's not married and who was tired of staying in friendships. And if I would have heard this 2 years ago, I would have been like, man, I should just stay even though they're not being kind to me. In my roommate situation, I should just go and be the strong person, but really they were breaking me.
Yeah.
And at some point you have to put up healthy boundaries, but I was figuring all this out and the thought came in my head like, where is that line?
Yeah.
Because 2 years ago I would have stayed out of acceptance.
Yep.
Because it was a fear of man thing. I wanted people to like me and accept me, and I would have done anything just to be in a certain friend group
And not be
Wow.
alone.
Yeah.
yeah. And I think it all just comes down to being close to his heart
Yeah.
and
Discernment.
And you
Just
learned a
learn it.
lot in that time, and that's what you got to go back and glean on is that the Lord allowed you to go through it to purify you and to learn when to stand up for yourself and when to be bold and courageous and not just be quiet,
Yeah.
And so That's what's so fun, is to see how far you've come.
Oh.
Well, oil comes through crushing.
Mm.
And that's where I mean, I'm just going to say it the way I feel it. I am not really going to follow someone who hadn't been through something.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean, and you can go through some things. It doesn't matter your chronological age,
Good.
but you know, I want to go, what season did you have to wrestle with the Lord? If I don't see a limp, and now it's not about me seeing the limp, but it's when we wrestle with the Lord that the oil, if we'll let him,
Mm.
we can choose even in those times. Kimmy, you could have chosen to stay in a marriage and be miserable.
Mhm.
So you didn't just say, I'm going to stay married.
Mm.
I am going to have what Jesus,
Mm.
the fullness of the marriage. But anyway, I just like somebody who's in the crushing.
Mm.
You walk with a limp. You've been through something. That's where we get the oil. So
Yeah.
Yeah. I
That's
like
where we get to testify.
yes.
Yeah. And I think it's like you said, it is those hard seasons, and everyone's hard season looks different.
For sure.
Like trauma to one person looks totally different from trauma to another person. And so the oil that comes out of those seasons, and I think about just like the fragrance.
And if you're not from the South, we are saying OIL.
Get those fragrant Jesus oils
Yeah,
out.
yeah. But I think that is going to encourage someone today. You're in a tough season, and just know that in the crushing and in the pressing, a new wine will come. Yeah.
And it would have been a totally different story if Naomi wasn't crushed.
Right.
Yeah.
If Ruth would have just been like, oh, I'll just be your buddy and friend. But Ruth said, I'm going to do this with you.
Yeah. Yeah. It is who you surround yourself with. Why am I thinking of, this is a joke. Have y'all heard of, you know what a raisin is? It's a grape who's been through something. It's good to laugh. It's good to laugh. Don't forget to laugh in those seasons. I remember feeling so sick and being so tired and so honestly hopeless. And you have to choose to stir up joy.
Yeah.
You have to choose to say, I am going to find some joy. I'm going to be around some people that will make me laugh.
Yes.
You know, so that's important. And that's free. That just came out of the air.
And you have to choose joy in the same way that you have to choose loyalty,
Absolutely.
like Ruth did. And so maybe it's a marriage or a friendship. Maybe there's a passion in your heart that feels like it was once this bursting wildfire, and now it's just these hot coals that the Lord wants to wake up in you today. But whatever it is, maybe the Lord is calling you to just blow on the fire and wake it up and choose to stick with that thing that you are passionate about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That God has put on your heart to do.
Yeah.
Okay, ladies, the time has come. Do y'all have any last words?
Like what happened with Ruth and with Boaz, it's been noted as like it's a sacred transaction. Like in the story, she goes and sits on the threshing floor.
Yes.
Which what happens at the threshing floor like that, where the harvest of the true good wheat is produced. And so Ruth, this foreigner, comes in, and when she leaves, she is eventually the great grandmother of David, or great, however the lineage is.
To that.
Yeah,
That's so good.
it's a big deal. Like they're in all of those seasons of really hard that Ruth went through.
Yeah.
Look what the legacy, look what the outcome, look at
Is
the
coming.
beautiful harvest that is reaped for you and I, and for the women listening to this podcast, and the men. Like it is through the lineage of Jesus Christ.
That
Thank
is so
you
good.
for staying in the hard and in the crushing.
Yeah. And I'm glad you said that. This is what I would leave with. Do not, the threshing, say it again about the threshing floor.
So the floor, that's actually where the actual wheat is, it's threshed, like it's produced, like the good what you would keep, like the bounty, what you would keep, and the yuck is thrown out, and it takes there, like they're up all night, they work there, and it's hard, and they even that's why Boaz slept there, because he would have been tired, it would have been late, but the production was the good wheat, like the good.
So the king is coming.
Yeah.
The king is coming. And I believe, and I'm taking this from another teacher, but it's late in the day, and don't get weary. Your most important relationship is your relationship with the Lord, and do what you need to do to stay hungry. He is faithful to you. He is never, ever going to leave you. But don't abandon ship premature. Let him do the thing in you to produce a harvest, because it is worth it.
Wow.
It is worth it. And we live the days we get to live in, you guys. It's an honor and a privilege. And but just don't abandon ship is what I would say.
Yeah. And all of you women have not abandoned ship. Stayed faithful. And just like the Lord honored Ruth's yes and her willingness to stay, he's honored y'all in ways that are so apparent. So thank y'all for being with
you,
me
Ellie
today.
Grace Owens, the best hoster ever. Hey, I think you do a really great job. You could, take his job.
Thanks so much for listening to the Unbridled Life podcast. We know your time is valuable, and we hope we bring real and relevant content that helps you live that unbridled life. If you want to help us spread the message, you can rate or review the podcast on whatever platform you like to listen to us, and share it with a friend or two. If you want to know more about who we are and what we're doing, head on over to theunbridledlifepodcast.com and learn more.